welcome back to another edition of the Stranded at Second podcast, which is the MLB podcast on the Stranded Sports Podcast Network. Well, last week we interviewed Jolly Olive, a YouTuber, but we got another YouTuber with us this week, Mike from Raving Sports. Mike, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, it's been in the works for a while. So, how are things going over there? What's going on with you right now?
Oh, everything's great right now. Having a really, really good month. Baseball season's in full force. And as you might know, the probably most dominant sport we cover is baseball. So a really good time for that. As you touched on, when you had Jack last week, we bumped him onto our roster, which was a really huge move for us. Really proud of that, for how much he brings to the table when he makes his content. So, yeah, things are really good right now for us. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, of course. Glad to hear that. And yeah, we did talk to Jack last week. And we'll get on that in a little bit. But first, let's start off with the easiest question of them all. What made you decide to want to start getting into YouTube content?
I've told this story before, and it's just so, I don't know how to put it other than that it's the only way something like this could ever come to someone's mind. It was literally a bed thought, like just laying down, going to sleep one night, where I kind of had the idea to kind of merge more loose internet type discussion of things with sport content, because at the time sport content was still very rigid and like more TV based, and I thought a more internet equivalent was kind of the first idea that we branched from. Kind of came up with it going to sleep one night, and then just stuck with me for like weeks, and I was like, okay, if I'm not going to do this now, I'm really going to regret it. So let's actually see if we can make this into something. And we're still here almost 4 years later. So I guess it ended up being something.
Yeah, certainly the best thoughts actually come when everyone's trying to fall asleep. Certainly some of my articles that I've come up with were trying to fall asleep. So, you mentioned it a little bit, but how did Raving Sports come to be? And then how did you get that name?
The name came from my dad. Because I ran him the idea, and I was like, you can't screw up the name. I kind of need all angles possible to come up with something good, but not like generic, something that symbolizes what we're about. And like the phrase "stark raving mad" is kind of a thing that comes into it, which is kind of a very long way of saying crazy, I guess. And sometimes you could say that's very fitting. We kind of live up to that name sometimes with some of the stories that we like to tell. I'll be totally honest, I forgot the other part of your question. So would you mind
oh yeah, no worries,
bringing that back for me?
How did it come to be? Like, how did you guys sort of just jump into things?
I would say probably like 2 months before we ended up actually launching the first set of videos. I was out looking. I had some contacts online, and I knew that if I was to do this the best of my ability, I couldn't just limit it to like friends nearby me. I had to kind of find the best people I could. So I kind of used social media to put the initial team together. Reached out to some people I knew. I knew Matt a little bit before. He likes to talk about how each of us did dabble in gaming content first. We knew each other from that. And obviously that's how we go back. And then I found other people through similar avenues. And because I'm big on not letting geography limit you. Because if you were just going to limit yourself to a couple friends nearby, the nice way to say it is you're probably hindering the kind of people that you can find. So I guess that's how we sort of came to be.
Yeah, definitely a big way to expand is to, get on all sides of the country. So that's pretty cool. So videos, you've made a ton of great videos, just incredible content, but how long does it usually take? You told me a little bit before off camera, or off video podcast, how long it takes, but like how sort of long does it take to draft the whole thing?
Now that's a very interesting question, because I guess the definition of draft is different for a lot of people. I usually know about 2 or 3 videos in advance what's going to be next. Like, I'm actually working on something that I have probably wanted to do for a little while now. I was starting to write the script, and now I'm different because in my head, I already know a lot of what I want to say before I write it down, and I do prefer to write down a full script verbatim, because I think it is actually very helpful. There are some people who I know who don't go on script, and I'm very much in awe of those people when you see their content. And you would never have noticed if I didn't tell you. For some people, I would say I can write a script in probably an hour or 2 at most. Recording, I do backup takes of a lot of lines. I would say my average recording is about half an hour, maybe a little less at this point now that I've gotten a better microphone, so it requires a little bit more or a little bit less effort to get a really good take of a line. And then a good rule of thumb I've heard another YouTuber say for editing that I think is true is every minute you see on screen is about an hour of editing. So I would say that's how long it would take if you extrapolate that.
Yeah, and when I've made videos before, definitely takes a little bit of time, but once you get it done, it's just great to finally get through that. But yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the videos that you've made. But first off, I want to know what one of your favorite is so far.
Oh wow, that's a loaded question. My default answer has always been my video on 2001. I think that has everything I like and what I can do. I guess like my formula, if you want to call it a formula, is come up with something, and I think there's depth and a narrative to make you laugh while telling you why I think you should care about it, and also for a lot of them, kind of make you feel for the subject too. And I think that that video has all of that done really well. So, and I thought it was a bit of a risky idea too, to focus on just a year. So I was very proud of how the result came out with that too.
Yeah, 2000. That video is excellent to watch. It's a good thing to sit down and listen to. So I've seen that one of my favorites. So I talked to Jack about this as well. But I mean, you guys are on a little bit of a bigger scale than he is right now. What I mean, in the day and age of social media, everybody knows that there's negative comments from everywhere. How do you and everybody that's involved with Stark Raving Sports deal with the negativity sometimes that comes?
I would say at this point, everyone around has learned to kind of take it with a grain of salt. Um, the way people work a lot of the time is if there's 99 really good comments and one really bad one, the one really sticks out for a lot of people. So I think that understanding that that's generally the minority with a lot of people. Generally, if you put out a video, the comments are probably going to be better than worse. I would say for since we've been doing this. You can't let anything be too personal because it really isn't over the internet a lot of the time. So I guess as long as you can recognize or have the ability to take like stupid internet comments with a grain of salt, then you're going to be a lot happier in life.
Yeah, it's hard for some people. It's harder than others to focus or not focus on the negative ones, especially when you're riding high and all of a sudden they just build you down. So you mentioned obviously the editing process, all drafting and all of that. But what do you think the most challenging part is of putting together everything?
I guess staying motivated. Sometimes for a lot of people, the process, like people just want to have the work without the process. You need to take some fun in the actual video making section of it. Of course, it can be a drag to some people. And I'd be lying if I said every video was a walk in the park to do. Some are harder than others to produce, but as long as you keep your head above water, I'm very long-term oriented anyway, so I can look past that pretty quickly. But I know that I would say I probably am not alone in saying that the process itself can be kind of difficult for some people.
Yeah, burnout can definitely affect people. That's happened to me before, just with school. So, I mean, in videos, you can see that as well. So one of your series of videos, one of your guys' series of videos, if baseball players were honest, if blank were honest, you guys got to go to and interview some Marlins players. I mean, how cool was that experience? And then just getting that to come to form.
To this point, the undisputed best day of our YouTube careers for Matt and myself. We were so lucky to have that opportunity to talk to some really good Major League Baseball players too. Like Sandy Alcantara has been an all-star. Miguel Rojas is a really good player. Like actual bona fide Major League players we got to spend time around. And that was nothing short of incredible, especially when you consider they were really nice to us and like respected what was going on. Like you could easily see a literal professional athlete being very like brush offy to just a bunch of internet dudes with cameras. But no, they were really, really genuinely good guys. And ever since we've been rooting heavy for everyone that we had the chance to be around.
Yeah, I saw that tweet today. It was Jordan Yamamoto taking on Miguel Rojas. That was pretty funny. Who do I root for? So that was pretty funny. So your most recent video, the one you made, was the history of tanking, takes a deeper dive into tanking and stuff like that. Where did that idea come from, and then how fun was that to work on?
I guess it just came from Actually, now that you mention it, I'm gonna say I have no idea where that one came from, and that's how a lot of videos come to be. Is they're very like it's not like you're out looking for ideas. A lot of the times, I'm sure you can attest to that with when you write your articles and such. It just happens to just come. Like you're reading something else. You think of, hey, remember that story, or hey, remember that player? That'd be there's something there to that, or just kind of sitting on ideas for a while. Of course, I've got the iPhone notes of a bunch of them that I'd like to do at some point, and then find one that I'm really feeling good about at the time, pursue it. I think if it's on that note list, I already feel strongly enough about it. And I guess how you get the idea, there's no one set way. Like I said, you can get it from watching baseball. You can get it from reading about baseball, seeing someone's baseball reference page, even just remembering an old story or seeing an old story. Like the Derek Bell video came because I found the yacht story in another article. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, it's not easy to get ideas. But when they come, you automatically know like, oh, this is a home run for a lot of these.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes I could attest to finding, a baseball reference or, sometimes I just remember some random player did something once and I'm like, hey, let me see how good he actually was. And then
Exactly.
It just comes. So that's pretty cool. So the most popular video you created was the story of Sid Finch, which currently sits at, I believe it's 2.5 million views right now. For people, not me, obviously, that, don't know about Sid Finch, can you sort of tell, people about that, tell people about who he is? And then, of course, how great does it feel to see that one take off?
I'd be glad to. So I'll preface it by saying the whole point of the video, contrary to the opinion of the commenters, is not to mislead people. The whole thing was, so Sid Finch was this supposed pitcher the Mets had in spring training 1985. He threw 165-mile-an-hour fastball. He wore one boot on the mound. He was from like the Himalayas. And he was not a real person. He was an April Fool's joke by Sports Illustrated. And this like really got people, like it really fooled them when meanwhile, like millennial and Gen Z headspace, you're like, how did you possibly fall for that? But even though Sports Illustrated was like much more the source of how people got their sports back then. So it was like that headspace back then was how could they be wrong about this kind of thing? So I took that as a challenge, the same way that the generation of Sid Finch bought in. I was like, how do I get millennials and Gen Z to fall for it the same way that they did? So I told the story like it was real until the punchline had to come. And the whole thing was, how do I frame it so that college kids and high school kids and that kind of age range will actually fall for it?
That's wonderful. And yeah, I've mentioned it a few times in the past to my friends. They don't really care about it, but it's one of the funniest April Fool jokes ever is because it got a ton of people and and it wasn't in a day and age where you can just like Google his name. But
exactly. Yeah. That's why I'm really glad that it's reached 2.5 million people and awestruck by it, because keeping that story and keeping the gotcha factor there for the people who have not seen it, I didn't want to let that story die because it's just so funny. So I'm really glad that I have a part in keeping it around and keeping new people fooled by it, which was the whole point.
That's wonderful to hear, and that it's performed so well. So you literally mentioned like 2 questions ago, Derek Bell. You can also tell the story of Derek Bell, and then of course John Olerud as well. To the listeners that don't know too much, the casual listeners about baseball, about these 2 guys, and then of course how just fun making videos on these subjects were, because Derek Bell was an interesting character.
So sure, I'll go back to that piece wise. I would say I'll describe Derek Bell. I called him something like the most fascinating off-field presence ever. His big thing was he lived on a yacht while he was playing. That was like the big focal point of the video. But there were so many little things about Derek Bell's whole career. Another one was like he would wear like custom rainbow-ish colored suits on the road, wear them once and then discard them. Like a lot of little things like that. I won't say too many because I want you to see the video to find out more of them. But hopefully that's piqued your interest. John Olerud, very underappreciated player from the 90s and 2000s, he had a unique skill set for his generation. And I would say someone like him is necessary today with how many strikeouts and such we're getting. So a guy who just, when batting average was not really king, but a guy who could really give you high batting averages, who was pushing 400 in August as a regular player one year. So just a guy who was just an all about, like, flat out great all around hitter, I would say. Did so many things right, and he wasn't really talked about much, but he didn't really care. and he kind of went with a really good mindset every day, even though that a lot of those steroid type first basemen were kind of stealing some recognition from him. He just kind of did his thing day in and day out, and I really respected that. And all like players like that I really like to talk about. I think that sometimes I don't really love talking about guys everyone knows, because I don't think that's the point. Like we're trying to teach you stuff and make you laugh too. It's kind of our whole thing. So on the rare occasion, I'll make a video. Like I've done a Mike Trout video. The whole point was, how do I tell you Mike Trout is good in a way you've never heard before? So even then, it's still trying to be doing something different there.
Yeah, John Olerud has one of the sweetest swings I've ever seen, and just both of those guys, Derek Bell and John Olerud, played for the Mets. But yeah, definitely very good videos to watch, and good ones to pay attention to, of course. You also mentioned this a couple questions ago. You guys added Sports Storm a while ago, but Jolly Olive recently. How big were these guys to add to the puzzle? And then, of course, how great has it been having these guys on the team?
Well, I would say they came in at very different points in their YouTube time. Storm was a one-time guest that we were like, hey, he was good, we should bring him back. And then it just kind of subtly happened where we were like, hey, you want to just like stay riding with us? And he had like under 1,000 subscribers at the time, and seeing him blossom into almost 20,000 is something that really makes me proud. And his work with us is just incredible. The whole connecting events you would never think would actually be connected. That's a really great thing that he does. I have no idea how he does it, but it's still really, I'm really fortunate to have him. Now, we picked up Jolly Olive when he was a lot more established on YouTube, even though that was a lot more in the works for a few months. We kind of had to wait for his school to end for the semester and have a lot more time to hop on our team. But I would say that's also an addition I'm really proud of, because he brings a whole nother dynamic. He gets it, like what we're all about. He's totally upfront even about how much of an influence we were to him coming up. So someone who buys into what we're trying to do and can make great content is special. I love having like a pretty big roster of guys who can totally make your sports viewing a lot more interesting.
Right. It brings a lot of variety to the table, which is important to have for like any channel. So, and Jolly Olive and Sportstorm, obviously, and everybody else is huge parts of the team. So from the beginning, you've obviously been there from the beginning, but how has it felt to just see the growth of SRS from the beginning to now?
It's really, really crazy to me, because the fact that I get to do this basically for a living right now is just something that I'm really appreciative to everyone who's enabled that for me. It starts with the viewers, and without the viewers and everyone who supports us, we would not be in this position. And with that, there's always a little bit of luck. And if you're going to grow on YouTube, even if you're going to make the great content, there's still going to be a lot of undersubscribed or underwatched channels. So I would say still having that support base to enable all this in the first place, that's where I got to attribute basically all the thanks to for making this possible each and every day. Seeing it grow from the baby that I started it as in June of 2017, really can't describe how proud I am and how happy I am to see this grow. But similarly, kind of want to see it grow some more. Kind of want to see what's in the future, what's on the horizon for us. Why stop now?
Right, exactly. I just want to ask about one more video. I know it says Matt made it, but obviously you guys were all involved in it. The Will Pond video, I mean, that one was one of my favorite videos I've watched in a long time. And I got to know just how long the process was to put that one together, like just drafting that and then getting all the people to talk to you about it as well. I mean, what was that one, just being part of that like?
Oh, let me just say how proud I am that that final product is on our channel. Right from the jump, Matt did a really, really great job. And when I tell you how long it was worked on, it's going to show how much work was really put into it. I think the idea came to be at least a year before. I'm gonna guess about a year before is when it was really like, okay, this is gonna happen. Like around when the Steve Cohen initial talks were, I'd say a little bit before that, when that was that whole 5-year transition plan thing that fell through a little before spring training. I would say that's where it kind of started, because it wanted to be kind of a retrospective on that pretty rambunctious era in the team's history. And then I would say actual production started in like August. Matt had his jaw wired shut, as he was talking about in September. So it was kind of, let's get slowly working on that now, like the writing and the accumulating of all the guests during that. And then once he can speak again, he was like, let's actually put it all together. And he spent a good part of November piecing that together. And then I think November 28th was the day it went live. So yeah, that was a whole process. I was really glad to kind of see unfold and help where I could with a project that large. It was still really surreal experience looking back on it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll link that as well because that video is definitely a must watch and almost timed perfectly when it was put out. So you mentioned the future. Just right now, if you have any future plans for content or additions, I mean, do you guys have anything in the works right now?
Of course, yeah. Every day we're working on new content. There's so much layers to this team. So obviously, some people have their own channels. Some people just work with us. There's stuff being worked on across the board. I will say that. New additions, maybe keep your eye out for that. Nothing super imminent, but I'm always open to expanding the roster for the right people.
Right. Yeah, definitely good to continue that variety as well. Do you have any advice for smaller channels right now that are just trying to grow their following as well?
I would say the biggest thing that I wish I understood earlier was thinking to yourself how your content stands in relation to everyone else. Like this might come off as a little bit cold, but you have to think from a viewer's perspective. They need a reason to watch you. So what's that reason going to be? I guess is the big question that you should answer first. Like, what's your biggest appeal to a viewer? Once you answer that question, you kind of have to accept that there is some luck in finding those viewers. Obviously, you got to do everything you can and kind of learn the algorithm and things like tips on titling and thumbnails and actual making your content where you want it to be. But in the beginning, obviously, that's when you're finding your footing. Those are some lessons that I think that the earlier you pick up on those things, the better off you're going to be.
Definitely good advice to have, especially for someone like me who's currently trying to grow Strand as well. So we'll get into a little more fun questions right now. As you know, and as we've mentioned before, I run Mets Home Run a Day, and you're always suggesting to me random obscure players for home runs. I got to know just in baseball history and then, of course, Mets history, who your favorite obscure player is from both.
For someone who makes a living talking about obscure players, picking one is really difficult. Wow. All of baseball, I think, is easier than the Mets because for baseball, I think I can point to Herb Washington, who was a pinch runner exclusive for a year or two on the A's in the 70s. His video that I did on him was kind of the first of kind of the change in our style of content. We were a lot more small scale, day-to-day type before that. And then I kind of had the idea to work on something a little bit more detailed and stat oriented with Herb Washington. And that was beloved right from the jump, especially compared, like I'd say beloved compared to the other videos. So we're like, hey, maybe we could like think bigger and work bigger with our projects. So kind of indebted to that video for what the content structure came to be now. And obviously a pinch runner exclusive is an obscure player galore. Mets is a lot harder because I just grew up thinking about obscure Met players day in and day out. And I guess the definition of obscure is also a little bit different for different people. So I'm going to have to really think bottom of the barrel, metaphorically speaking. So I could definitely have someone who's obscure. I know Jack said Jordani Valdespin. He would have been a great pick. I think I'm going to go with Lassing's Millage. Because he was one of the first jerseys I ever owned. Something about the high-fiving the fans after the home run. I love that. I didn't understand why everyone hated it. I'm sure Tony La Russa hated it, but not sure. What I wish Twitter was around during that, I guess is what I was trying to get at. He was a generation too early, I would say, in baseball. Interesting talent, interesting person. Not really the greatest career. A lot of potential on the table, both in story and in statistics, but definitely someone I'm always going to massively overrate in my head for 6-year-old me seeing him in the black Mets jerseys hitting nukes.
Yeah, same here. Truly just a shame that he couldn't put it all together for the Mets. And, Herb Washington, only player in Topps Cards history to have runner listed on their card as the position. So that's a pretty cool stat about him as well. You literally just mentioned Tony La Russa as well, and we talked about that on our last episode. But I just want to know your current thoughts on the state of baseball right now, like injuries, no hitters, all that jazz right now. What are you feeling?
I would say small scale with like the no hitters and the injuries. It's bad, obviously. Too many no hitters is kind of a problem. I don't think it takes away from the accomplishment of a no hitter. I think it's more representative of the lack of hitting problem, and we need hitting in baseball. Not too much, because that was a bit of a point of contention in years past. But obviously, you can't have no hitter every day. Feels like that's not fun for anyone except the pitcher, really. So I would say that's something that needs to be addressed in one form or another if it continues. Injuries, they're not fun. They claim way too many careers. There's so many of them. As a Met fan, you have to see the kind of lineup they're putting together. If you had said, "Hey, this is the lineup on what's today, May 23rd," you probably would have been this May 23rd a spring training game would have been probably the first response. So that's not fun. The only fun thing is it is giving some less name recognizable minor league players some playing time in the big leagues, which if you look at it from that angle, it's kind of cool. But once these guys come back, these injured big leaguers, that's going to make for a lot of tension, I guess I would say, and a lot of unnecessary problems with like guys' service time, and minor league rosters are going to get depleted again, and jobs are going to come in and out of baseball. So from that sense, looking past it is just, hey, this guy's hurt. That's not fun. When the guys come back, like think about it when Thanos snapped and the people came back, there were problems. People are going to come back who were hurt. That's
Oh,
going to lead to a lot of stuff.
yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of soft tissue injuries as well, which is really tough to
Hmm.
see in baseball. And yeah, you mentioned the guys on the Mets coming in. I mean, I have loved watching Janesh Fargas since he came up. He just enjoys the game a lot. But so sort of drawing to a close here. I think I know what you're going to plug, but if you want to plug or shout out anything, now is your time.
Well, youtube.com, Stark Raving Sports. I think it's youtube.com/c/Stark Raving Sports if you want me to have the exact URL. But if you type Stark Raving Sports to YouTube, you can find myself. You can find the wonderful team we have trying to make sports content more interesting and make for casuals and diehard alike to be more interested in the sports is basically the goal. So that sounds like something you want to see. Definitely appreciate you checking us out.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely go subscribe to them. They make some wonderful, wonderful videos, some of my favorites on YouTube. Once again, this has been the Stranded at Second podcast. Mike, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Of Stark Raving Sports, and we'll see you next time or whenever I decide to sit down with somebody else. Thanks again, Mike.